Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the live stream. My name is Matt Bailey. I'm the National Ambassador for the Scotch Malt Whisky Society here in Australia, and I love going live every night. Just love talking about different things to do with whiskey, different journeys, different stories, different distilleries, always something interesting to talk about. Scott Fitzsimons, really appreciate you tuning out on the intro music alone. If you'd like to provide some music that is royalty-free, doesn't get the video muted, which I've had that problem a few times, I apologize to everyone who enjoyed me playing Battles one week until they kept muting the first 3 minutes of my video or something like that. The intro's music just kicks off 1 minute before the broadcast is supposed to start because that means you get ready to actually get live rather than you tuning in now and I've already started talking. And you missed the beginning. So hello and welcome. Thank you so much. I always like to go live every single night. And Wednesday night is usually Roundtable, which is always fun. Whiskey Roundtable, which is a co-collab between SMWS and Oak Barrel, admittedly mostly Oak Barrel. And we have always the four amigos at the beginning, and then we often have a special guest. Last week was a really special one. On the Monday night, we did a Roundtable live at the Oak Barrel, out the back there for Whiskey Fight Night. That was one of the most popular roundtables we've ever had. It was a lot of fun, and I really appreciate everyone who tuned in and asked cool questions. And we tackled some pretty broad topics, which was fun as well. So Mark Teague, good to see you. Rowan Hitch, good to see you. Rob Akers, bring your best lignin chat. Yeah, look, that's true. You know, that's true. That's what I've brought up on screen for our chat tonight, is to talk a little bit more in depth about wood. Now, the reason why that's happened, why I've decided to do this, is because for two reasons. One, last night's discussion was on STR casks as pioneered by the late Dr. Jim Swan. We talked about STR casks last night instead of a rant. And there were so many things that I mentioned that were sort of related to the basics of oak that I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into tonight. Now, again, this is something where even I'm still learning a lot about. And I think that if I can pass something across to you to pick up on, you know, this is going to be a bit of fun as well. Scott says battles would be unbelievably good, but for royalty free, my solo spoken word Screamo side project album will be my solo side project country album. Scott, I'm going to go with B. You know what? I don't know any country music that has royalties attached, because why would you bother? Matt Quercus Alba Bailey. Yeah, I'll take that. Yeah, I'll take Quercus Alba. For those wondering, that's Mark Westmoreland from Wolfburn. Lovely to see you, Mark. And Quercus Alba, White Oak, American Oak. You know, we're going to dig into a few things like that. He definitely can't read Latin. Okay, cool. Thank you for all the early distractions in my live stream, as always. So I'm going to bring up, like I said, the other screen for us to have a chat about some of the things happening that I want to talk about. So last night, like I said, touched a little bit on the STR casks, the treatment of shaved toast rechar as pioneered by Dr. Swan. But I was it's only one type of cask usage. It's a very fast way of maturing whiskey. It's definitely something which we touched on. If you want to watch that video, please do. It's on our YouTube and group and everything like that, as always. However, if we're exploring the flavors of whiskey, we have to at least first acknowledge that there are other aspects to which build the flavor character of a spirit and build the end product of what you enjoy. The reason why I was touching on this is because last week, on Friday night, we had the Grand Tour of Speyside, which was hosted by our Cellar Master and New South Wales State Manager, Andrew Durbidge. One of the whiskies in the lineup was this one, which I'm having a dram of tonight to share along with you. I'd love to see what you're dramming on. Put it in the comments. A maple syrup mountain spring, it was called. 80.14 is the code on that one. And I was absolutely spellbinded by it. It's a first fill ex-bourbon hogshead, 8-year-old spicy and sweet whiskey from Distillery 80 in the 14th cask ever past panel. How can a first fill ex-bourbon hoggy taste this good and taste literally like a mountain maple syrup in a glass? It honestly is. It's the one kind of whiskey you could nose all night. It's unbelievable. We play both kinds, country and Western. Yeah, take that, Scotty. You know what? You can have Blazing Saddles or Blues Brothers references all night out of me. You're not getting any Latin. So if we're talking about the flavor in whiskey, we need to first acknowledge this one, the flavor of the grain, whether it be malted barley, corn, rye, wheat, whatever it is, the flavor of the grain. The grain base is hugely important in the flavor development of the spirit. That is known. That is, and constantly being researched and constant changes happening. You can thank even local distilleries like Archie Rose for experimenting in this, doing things like their Sandiego rye, and which is a particular strain of a New South Wales farm rye, and things like that. So, with that said, like the grain is a hugely important part. I'm not dismissing that at all. I'm just saying we're going to explore on the cask side of things. The water source that goes into the whiskey, while I would argue is a little bit less important. I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean it's not the be all and end all. I think it's very important. It's just one of the core ingredients. Absolutely. Then we can go to the fermentation process, which is, there's an open top wooden ferment going on there. Looks lovely and bubbly and beery and tasty. That is that photo was taken at Woodford Reserve. That one, and then you've got the distillation, the ever important part of how the stills react. The copper reacts with the spirit, with the wash, and creates the spirit that we know and love. And that spirit character, it's driven by the stills, the shape, the size, the height, the length of the distillation run. Is it a slow distillate? Is it a fast distillate? Is it even on the right of that photo, is the window open whilst they do it, kind of thing? There's so many factors, environmental and otherwise, and the magic of the copper that creates that amazing eau de vie, that amazing spirit off the still that we know and love today. And those, I quite like that photo. That one's taken at Blair Athol Distillery, and it's quite obviously recently polished stills. So I'm not dismissing the fact that those four elements I've just mentioned play a huge part of the spirit development, what comes of the stills. But what, however, needs to be touched on is the aspect of how the cask can influence the spirit and what that means and how that comes about. So there we have some hoggies that have been just freshly charred there, freshly toasted, I should be more accurate, ready for filling into new spirit once the heads are refitted. That's just some minor coopering going on there at a particular distillery, and it's not so much this is not commercial sized sort of distillery in terms of their cooperage, but something like Speyside Cooperage is, and others around the world. And then we end up with the end result, which is casks that kind of look like this, racked up, and they are always a little bit sort of like, you know what, it's they've been put together quickly and efficiently for the maturation of whiskey. Now, cask usage in other disciplines like wine and whatnot are quite a bit more, meticulous in some ways, and the volumetric differences and care and love differences, I think, in some ways. I don't want to be uncharacterize it, but there you have a photo of a wine cellar in operation. One thing you've immediately noticed is the construction and care that's gone into some of the casks, especially in the construction of the heads. Not so much in that photo actually, but is quite a bit more a bit more love and care, I think, in some cases, which is why good wine casks, good sherry casks and whatnot are always in high demand around the world for the maturation of Scotch whiskey. They are always in that way interesting and quite desirable. So there, I've shown this photo before. This is just four of the more commonly seen cask sizes used in the maturation of Scotch whiskey. On the far right there, we've got your ASB or bourbon barrel, which holds approximately 200 litres. Wine hogshead, which are approximately 240 litres. Whiskey hogshead, 250 litres, and a sherry butt, approx 500. Now, it says approx on each one because the size and does change depending on the height and width of staves, and all sorts of other things like that, which factor into the size, but generally that's where they sit. You can see on that wine hogshead one there, I can't really highlight it, but you get where I'm coming from. That wine hogshead one there is, you can see that there's that barrel brace, and it's a bit more sort of, like I say, meticulous care that has gone into the wine hogsheads as opposed to a bourbon barrel that's been refitted into a hogshead. It's only a small change, but it makes a difference in the context of this discussion. And there you have all the different types of cask types that are used in the maturation of whiskey. Now, things like firkins, quarter casks, rundlets, and whatnot are very uncommon. Just as gourders, drums, and tuns are very uncommon. Even pipes, I would say, are quite uncommon in the grand scheme of actual sort of cask makeup. How big is a Bailey butt? Look, mate, too big. So there you go. That's some of the basics there of cask sizes, I should say. Of course, in the wine industry, it varies a lot wider than it does in whiskey. there's a cask that was once used for the holding of wine. I won't say maturation because you wouldn't get much maturation out of a cask that size. That's a cask that's now been refitted into its own cellar, if you like, on wheels. That is a walk-in cask. It's so big you can just walk in around and step inside and walk around it. It's obviously filled with wine racks inside it there. And then one of my favorite images is a cask that is so big that it had its own dance floor on the top there. So you could take the little staircase around the side of the cask, and there'd be a dance floor on top for you to drink lots of wine and dance the night away. Now there is a particular special example. That's called the Heidelberg Tun, which was the biggest ever cask known in construction, which held 220,000 liters of wine. Question from Georgia. Sorry, I said your middle name first. From Rob Akers. Does everyone just fill to the max level? Yes. Casks are filled to the top until they bubble out, even sometimes a little bit right at the bung, or approximately as close as they can get, because then you're getting a higher spirit to cask ratio involvement on that. So yes, there's no examples that I know of where they would only half fill a cask. Sort of asking for trouble there with both the effect on the spirit and the angel share, I would say, would be quite adversely affected, if you like. And there's a field of casks waiting to be filled. That one's from Macduff Distillery. Oops, I've gone a little bit too far. Sorry. There's Macduff Distillery, and then they're filled, labeled, and let to rest for a long time there. Now, some of the aspects I want to go over, some of the important stuff here to talk about, and this is just nerding out on a few things here. So, where was I going to go with this? So, let's just break down what an oak cask is. So, the structure of the wood holds the spirit. For the most part, most whiskey is matured, especially in Scotland. It has to be matured in oak. Around the world, it's still mostly oak as well, which is good because it provides an even absorption and even balance of maturation to that spirit. There are examples out in the wild of red gum, of ash, of other wood types being used, but generally speaking, Quercus alba, Quercus robur are the two most common, especially Quercus alba, American white oak. Some of the comments coming through here actually. Adams Distillery in Tas, don't they use a slosh technique? You mean like a Solera? I mean, a lot of distillers are using Solera systems now where they are letting their mature spirit finish. It's a bit of a loose term, but rest in a Solera system where they can consistently top it up and fill from that. Archie Rose do the same. Quite a few do it. Star would do the same. Dances with Casks, the latest whiskey movie in production. Yes. And we'll watch if can confirm no Bailey starring role. Scott, you're in fine form tonight. Good to see you. Caleb says, I think some of the society casks end up not completely full when they recast into a larger size. That would be a very good point, Caleb. I mean, in the case of something like 7.44, that was 2 bourbon casks that went into 1 sherry butt. So maybe there would have been some room left over in that one. But it's, like I say, it's uncommon. A few places experimenting with it. On fire, mate. Slosh equals roll around. We'll probably have filled to the top initially. Yeah, I mean, there's no reason for distilleries to not fill to the top of each cask. Let's put it that way. It wouldn't be desirable for the spirit effect or for the end product either. Pardon me. So let's talk about the structure of the oak for a second. So there's 3. Oak is made up of 3 things. You've got cellulose, you've got hemicellulose, and you've got lignin. So the first one, cellulose, gives oak strength. That's the strength of the wood. The cellulose is the strength. That's not really important to us, except for making sure that it doesn't leak. But the second 2, when heated, so when you got hemicellulose and lignin, and when they're heated, they break down. They start to break down and create flavor compounds which are soluble in ethanol. So it adds desirable flavors to wine and spirits. So hemicellulose, let's go to that first one of those 2. It contains sugars which caramelize during toasting, giving flavors of nuttiness. Walnuts, almonds, hazelnut kind of notes come off the hemicellulose because it's the toasting of that which drives that flavor, that caramelized flavor, that nutty flavor in spirit. It also gives off notes of caramel, licorice even sometimes, and an occasion butter. So buttery notes, caramel notes, all very desirable and can be all found in the first of those two main compounds of oak. The second one is lignin, Lignin. Lignin is transformed into a wide range of flavors from the cask, which are all slowly released into the spirit throughout maturation. So the first one is mostly for the toasting, charring aspect of cask preparation to be filled. And the second one, the lignins, are being there for a wide range of flavors, which are all throughout maturation. So it normally adds those floral notes, spice notes, cinnamon, clove, vanilla, chocolate, some fruity elements, even green notes. If you've ever had a whiskey that has like a grassiness or a pine note, I know out of some stuff like Manickmore and Glenlossie and even Linkwood to an extent, I get often a grassy note, which I really appreciate in the spirit. And lignin itself as a compound is also present in the husk of a grain of barley. And so the kilning of that adds a range of flavors and created also during the toasting of the wood. So that's the basics of tonight. That and it's wide, as I wanted to also touch on, it's widely accepted that the end quality of the alcoholic beverage that goes in does require quality wood. And that means I'm talking from the staves to the heads to everything that goes into it. And one of the biggest challenges for cooperages and for wine bodegas and whatnot, sherry bodegas, is to take into the account all the factors of what desirable aspects that come out of these compounds. So most of the studies around this aspect are normally focused on the phenolic compounds extracted during aging, and especially to do with wine oxidization and color. But it also plays into things that we've talked about before, like sensory properties such as astringency, bitterness, and oak aroma volatile compounds that have been the subject of that as well. So it's generally considered by most experts, but the compounds of the interest are part of the low molecular weight compounds of the oak, which represent about between 2 and 10% of oak wood composition. So I won't go too nerdy on it tonight, but I do want to dig into this over maybe a few episodes. Adam's slosh technique means they only partially feel to understand, different to a Solera. Okay, well, there we go. Matt, is there any particular property in French oak that's responsible for the spiciness? I'm sure there is, Darren. I don't actually know that off the top of my head. It is generally considered, yes, that French oak has a spicier character, and that can be desirable to some distillers, but generally is less desirable and far more expensive than American oak. And you got to understand, this is economies of scale, especially for Scotch whiskey. Needs to have that, needs to work on that over a long time. But if someone knows the answer to that live, then they're welcome to put in the comments. Toasting for flavor, but also opening the wood to receive the spirit for more contact, increasing the ratio. Exactly, Mark. And that's really important. The toasting does add a huge element to that flavor. It interacts with the oak and the hemicellulose, but that's exactly right. Joey says, from what I know, oak is also designed for its ability to allow breathability and evaporation without allowing leaks. Exactly. It's a breathable wood. That's exactly right, Joey. I don't know the parts of air per cubic centimeter ratios between that and say something like red gum. You need to speak to a proper arborist. Not just me. But yeah, that is one of the huge benefits of that. It is generally considered a desirable aspect. Like that maturation is desirable. That flavor profile is desirable, and that's why most spirit goes into Quercus alba. That's why most spirit and wine casks and sherry casks are quite desirable. But I want to just move on to my next point here on this, and this is tying all this back into the SMWS a little bit here. This is a photo of a sherry bodega with quietly maturing sherry casks. There's two types of sherry casks in the industry. There's sherry bodega ones like this, which are being used for the maturation of sherry over a Sistema system, that a bodega that takes each rack has a different year code and takes sometimes decades and decades of maturation of that sherry. They are uncommon, but even now they are often acting as a lot of them, I don't know about this one, but a lot of them act as what's the word for it? As seasoning. Now, seasoning of sherry casks is a much bigger industry, where it is cooking sherry. It's then dumped as vinegar, that is used for the maturation of Scotch whiskey as well. Those sherry casks are, and they're actually increasing in quality consistently. So Scotty says the work boutique American coopers are going into in terms of toasting, charring, and the varying combinations of the two in virgin oak is fascinating. Absolute rabbit hole, but fascinating. Yeah, no, Scott, it's the more you, Scott raises a very valid point there. A lot of countries, and I'd argue Scotland are doing it as well, and Ireland especially at the moment, there's a lot of countries that are experimenting with understanding more and more about the positive qualities of what can be attained out of toasting and charring virgin oak or even refill oak, and why and how that's desirable. We've got to remember that whiskey being matured in casks was almost like a happy accident. They were transport casks, and they realized that the longer they spent in transport, the better the spirit tasted. How did that work? So if a spirit spent 6 months on a boat as opposed to 2 months on a boat, it was a better a better spirit. So the end spirit was the stronger spirit at the end. So this is sort of like, and of course, as I've talked about before, it was known for its therapeutical qualities, its pharmaceutical uses, rather than its enjoyment. But over time, we've enjoyed it. So this is, yes. But Scotty, it is a rabbit hole. The more you dig into these kind of things as well, like these kind of this aspect of toasting and the supply of such, is fascinating. And we're not just touch on some of the basics of hemicellulose and lignins today as well. Question here says, I don't know who's asking that question, but it says, how long can barrels be left in A, the weather, and B, since having been emptied from its original contents, i.e. bourbon, before they deteriorate or improve? Will the COVID down tools lead to a rare batch of casks that have sat idle for longer than normal? To answer the first part of your question, they can be left outside for quite some time, and I know some distilleries that leave them out for sometimes weeks at a time, but generally speaking, I think they're only left out for a short amount of time after being received. I'd have to check on that one exactly. But as for that second part of your question, I think only time will tell. I mean, we don't know what the long effects of the of COVID and down tools. I mean, I don't know how long the down tools was for, especially in places like Scotland and America for over the last few months. It may have been quite a while in some cases. So maybe there'll be a bit of a sort of a lack of whiskey availability maybe in 8 to 12 to 15 years from now. I'm not sure. It's really hard to tell. I think we will see a bit of a gap in supply at some point, but we work very closely with a lot of coopers and a lot of bodegas on ensuring supply, and I want to talk about that in a moment. Slightly off topic, but how would you explain HTMC? May have been previous live I missed, but basically the difference between toast and char. I have talked a bit about the difference between toast and char. I'm going to do that on a separate stream, Caleb. But HTMC, for those watching, means heavy toast, medium char. It is a barrel treatment process that is quite unique. It's unique in a way like STR is in some ways. It's a little bit less unique than STR, I'd argue, but it's still unique cask treatment that provides a very favorable, I would argue, very favorable subjective flavor quality to whiskey. So well worth looking out for. Fresh lumber is often air dried for years. Well, Scotty, yes and no. A lot of it is kilned though. I mean, a lot of the timber out there is kilned, especially in Scotland, where most of it is. There's quite a few distilleries, I guess. I know that insist on air dry, 36-month air dry, etc. Before being coopered into virgin barrels. Thanks, Dave, for Arturism. Oh, okay, yeah, 36-month air dry. I should have read the rest of the comment. Yes, there's Glenmorangie used 36-month air dry, I think, as well as Ardbeg, and there's a few distilleries I know that are doing it. But as economies of scale grow and as distillery needs to grow, I think you'll see a lot more using kiln dried. It does actually provide a difference of the flavor and the spirit overall in the end product. Something I want to touch on here, as I keep getting distracted, that's okay. But something I just want to touch on here. This photo is from bodega, like I said, where we would source some of our sherry casks at the Society, and it is for real in the fact that we do. Now, there's Ewan Campbell on the left there, and I'll have to remind myself which bodega he's visiting on this one here. But it was in Jerez, and I'm going to bring that photo up a bit clearer for us all to see here. So there he is, working his magic and selecting staves. Like this is for real happening at the society, which is really exciting. This is something we don't really talk about too much. We're often focusing on what's coming up in Outturn or which single casks we're really excited by. But this is exciting to see the other side of the production, to see Ewan actually actively picking out air dried staves and particular casks at these bodegas. I'm gonna have to zoom in on that one. Sorry, I don't know what happened there. I can't. There's Kai and Ewan in the middle there, surrounded by two guys from the same bodega, doing again cask selection and discussing supply, so that we can have these direct relationships with these bodegas, which I find very exciting, rather than it just being sort of like, admittedly, a lot of independent bottlers will be a case of they'll be sourcing what they can get, and we're going to them saying, you know what, we're going to be doing this a little bit differently, and we'd like to have a direct relationship. Yes, that might mean over time, it might mean things like some casks might be dearer for what would be perceived as maybe a moderate aged whiskey, but the quality is always there, and that's the process that we go through with SWRI and with these direct sourcing of casks, which I think is really exciting, because it means we get this access to these kind of casks and access to what's happening around these are quite small photos. Sorry, I'm going to have to give a proper zoom on each. There's Ewan again doing his examination of some rather large looking casks there. They look like Gorders, or actually even bigger. They might, it's not quite a ton though. So probably a Gorder. And there he is again, tasting some of the sherry. Well, that's a different, that was a different day, that one. That was at Spinola, Jimenez Spinola, which is mostly PX sherry. So there we go. Some of the things going on over there with us at the Society and casks is, I find, very exciting. And that's why over time we'll be able to see a bit more detail on our label and a bit more detail into the what's happening with, especially with things like sherry casks, like this one from September Outturn, a belter of a dram. Scotty, I know you tasted that one, so that was good fun. That was a good fun whiskey from Distillery 6 there. My last little announcement before I finish up and take a few more questions is our gathering has been selling very well, both virtually and online. Two things to mention there. The virtual gathering on Saturday, the 26th of September, about 80 or so packs have sold. There's still a few left on the website, but not many, maybe 20 or 30 left. So if you want to jump in on the gathering on the 26th, Andrew and I would love to see you there. However, the global gathering, the in-person events, I added 12 more tickets to the Bal Blair one, so we could move to a bigger room because it sold out very quickly. So we've moved to a bigger room where we can still COVID-safe fit a number of people in the room that is more than the 20 that we were looking at for Pioneers Lounge downstairs. We've moved upstairs to the ISC room at the Royal Automobile Club. That's going to be a lot of fun. And in fact, at that particular event, if I can preview this now, if you are coming to that event, you don't want to know what's going to happen. And I know there are a few people at the Sydney event who are a bit like, don't tell me, we want to be surprised. Actually, I'm going to keep that surprise. There you go. Well, look, you saw the box. That's enough. But we've got something. I'm opening something very old and very special at that night. And I think there might be 5 of those 12 tickets that I released this morning still online. So don't yeah. You're talking about Hoggy still. Yeah, I tried to read a bit up and I never found a definitive answer. There's a chance the Hogs bit, the Witches bit, and the Barrel bit are all linked in old measure somewhere. Yeah, it probably is a case of old English of translation of combining words, something like that. There are only 5 tickets left. Okay, well, there you go. I put 12 up and now there's 5 left. Look, if you want to come to that night, it's on the 25th. It's the night before the virtual. I'm co-hosting that event with none other than Andy Milne, who is a local expert and distributor for Bal Blair. So he's going to have a chat to us as well that night. It's going to be a great night. Really looking forward to it. So that was all I had on tonight. Just a little bit of a chat about casks. Really appreciate your tuning in. Had to go a little bit later tonight. Like I said, 7:30 start instead of 7. That's the way it goes. But it looks like no one minded. It's really good. I hope to see you all again tomorrow for Roundtable. You'll see the announcements in the morning for all of that stuff. That's going to be very exciting. In the meantime, have a great night. I wish you all the best, and Sanjava. See you all tomorrow.